Star Wars 7x7 episode 2484. Earlier this week, we talked about the non-spoiler review of Star Wars: Thrawn Ascendancy: Greater Good. And today we're going to talk about the audiobook version. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. And we're going to do some math today. Sort of, just kind of kidding, but not really. But we're going to talk about some numbers as far as the audiobook delivery goes, because it's kind of a window into the books themselves and the characters and the presentation and so forth. So yeah, we're talking about the audiobook for Thrawn Ascendancy: Greater Good, and it's narrated by Mark Thompson, who is a veteran of Star Wars audiobook projects. He has been a guest on the show in the past, and he's also been brought up in many conversations. I think most recently, the interview with January Price about January Lavoie about Victory's Price. Anyway, Mark Thompson is a fabulous narrator and wicked talented. Brings the Thrawn audiobook, to its usual professional standards. He does it very well and has been doing Thrawn books for quite a while now. So, in a way it's old hat, and yet he still brings the same energy and verve to the project and to all the characters that surround Thrawn and who are going through their machinations off scene or behind the scenes where Thrawn doesn't know about it just yet, all that good stuff. So once again, terrific performance by Mark Thompson, naturally. And also the kudos to the Penguin Random House audio team as well, because this story, like the previous Thrawn book, starts off not with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. They do the variation on that where they say a long time ago beyond a galaxy far, far away. And just the atmosphere of the presentation, it feels a little bit off, and I mean that in a good way, because when I say it's a little off, it's a little bit different somehow atmospherically from the Star Wars books, the audiobook presentations that take place within the galaxy far, far away, like Victory's Price, for example. So yeah, just the general audio atmosphere, the background noises and sounds, the sounds of the special effects with the laser battles between the ships and so forth. Like, they definitely do a great job at differentiating this from the stuff that takes place in the world of Star Wars that we know very well, that we've seen in live action and animation, for example. The thing that struck me about the audiobook presentation for Greater Good, though, is the runtime. And I started digging into this because I just got a little bit obsessive with the numbers. The hardcover copy of Greater Good is about 430 pages, and the runtime of the audiobook is just over 16 hours. But I went and looked back at Victory's Price, we were just talking about a moment ago, and January Lavoie had talked about how this was one of the longest ones, and in fact, it is. It is the longest audiobook presentation for the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. It is also 16 hours. It's just a couple minutes different from what Greater Good is, but the Victory's Price book in hardcover is 480 pages. It's like 50 pages longer than Greater Good. Now, I grant you that, maybe the typeface or the layout somehow affects word count on pages. And yeah, so, it's probably not totally an apples to apples comparison. But I got to wondering about that, because one of the things that January Lavoie talked about when she talked about the way that she approached the narrative and her read on the story and her reactions to it, one of the key words that she mentioned was exhaustion. And she talked about how the characters are exhausted by everything that they've gone through, not just in the overall war, but also specifically in the course of the two Alphabet Squadron novels that preceded Victory's Price. But that exhaustion of the characters doesn't necessarily also apply to the way that the audiobook itself is presented and read. And so I got to wondering whether this was just a weird fluky thing or something, but I went back and looked at Chaos Rising, and I compared it also to Shadowfall, which was the second novel in the Alphabet Squadron trilogy and actually read by someone else, by Carol Manda. And it turns out that even though Shadowfall is 16 pages longer, it's actually about 18 minutes shorter in the audiobook presentation. So it made me reconsider my thinking about the Thrawn books and realize that the reason why they run longer is because of the deliberateness of the presentation of the Chiss and the way that they talk, the way that they think, the way that they act, that requires a lot slower, if you will, delivery of things, right? Thrawn is not an energetic talker, right? And for the most part, the rest of the Chiss are also not exactly energetic talkers. Certainly in battle scenarios, there's a lot of fast communication and so forth, but there's a lot of time where it's not, where it is more thoughtful and in-depth and consideration, and Thrawn getting people to say, well, what do you think? Like, your observations, the delivery is much more deliberate by comparison. I'd like to think that if you and I were asked to describe the Chiss in general or Thrawn in specific, if we had to list out character traits or qualities or something like that, I'd like to think that we would come up with, calmness and deliberateness if we were asked to describe them. But I don't know, at least for myself, whether I necessarily identified that as an explanatory trait for why the audiobooks of the Thrawn books seem to be a little bit longer than the rest of the Star Wars audiobooks from a time and a page count, consideration, but it really does seem to be that quality of these characters and of this species. And so it just gives me a greater appreciation for Mark Thompson's work in this regard, and also for the Penguin Random House audio team in understanding that these characters have sort of a different set of requirements in their delivery and rolling with it and not just steamrolling the presentation by comparison. I think I may have read the book a little bit faster, or at least had Thrawn's voice speaking faster in my head when I was reading the book version versus when I was listening to it. But ultimately, I do find that the audiobook presentation situation is really compelling. Like, I really enjoy getting the audio atmosphere and the special effects and the different voices and the performance of Mark Thompson, whether it's him or January Lavoie or Carol Manda or any of the other talented narrators that the folks at Penguin Random House Audio have brought to their Star Wars storytelling. I really do enjoy getting more of the multimedia experience. So if you are into audiobooks, if that's your sort of thing, and if you're into Thrawn, if he's your sort of guy, then I think you will definitely enjoy the Greater Good presentation for sure. And before I forget, I do want to thank Penguin Random House Audio for sending me a copy to review in advance. It was very nice of them, as always. And there's also a way that you can support Star Wars 7x7 if you like audiobooks, and that is by going to sw7x7.com/audible, where you can sign up for a free trial if you haven't done so before, and you can actually get your first audiobook free. So if you want to start trying it out by trying with Greater Good, or if you want to start with Chaos Rising, like we talked about in the book review episode, that, maybe it's probably good to either reread it or find a good summary, or re-listen to it, as the case may be. Anyway, you can get your first one for free at sw7x7.com/audible, and if you decide to stick with it and go with a subscription, they will send us a little bit of a referral fee as a result. It doesn't cost you anything extra, it just gives a little something to us for the referral. So once again, that's sw7x7.com/audible. And that's what I've got for you as far as the non-spoiler audiobook review goes for Star Wars: Thrawn Ascendancy: Greater Good. And that's going to do it for this episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.